Hi, I'm Malika Bilal. Today, is Theresa May's Brexit deal breaking apart? An upcoming vote will decide the future of the UK's departure from the EU. Tweet us your thoughts or leave them in our live YouTube chat, and you too could be in the stream. British Prime Minister Theresa May has just days to whip the votes needed to push her Brexit agreement with the European Union through the British Parliament. Parliament will vote on December 11th. However, the Prime Minister faces tough opposition from both critics and supporters of Brexit. Those who want to remain part of the EU say May's deal is just a watered-down version of the UK's existing membership agreement, while those who favor leaving the EU say the deal doesn't deliver a clean break. So does May have enough political power to see the deal through? And if she fails, what next? Well, joining us to discuss this in London, Simon Usherwood. He's a Deputy Director for the UK in a Changing Europe. Also in London, Gwen Towler. He's a former Brexit campaigner. And in Oxford, Shaista Aziz. She's a journalist and a newly elected councillor for the Oxford City Council. Welcome, everyone, to the stream. Gwen, I will start with you. We have nearly a week before this vote. Do you think the Prime Minister Theresa May can pull this off?
Cats have a greater chance to live in hell. Trying to pull this one off over the next week. It's just not happening.
It's just not happening. All right, Shaista, I love the colorful anecdote there. Shaista, what do you make? Do you think that she can pull this off?
I don't think she can pull this off. I think she's a very weak Prime Minister. To be fair to her, she's got a very hard job to pull this off, but it's not going to happen.
So I want to go to our community next. This is Perry, and he says the withdrawal agreement, together with the aspirational addendum, falls well short of the clean break from the EU that was voted for. And Simon, I'll direct that one to you, because that said, Theresa May and European leaders have repeatedly said this is the best that we are going to get and the best that we could have hoped for. What do you make of that?
Well, it's difficult, isn't it? Because as that tweet's saying, people voted for lots of different reasons, lots of different types of Brexit. And almost inevitably, you're going to get people who feel that it's not the agreement that they wanted. So again, I think there's kind of a mismatch between people's motivations and the kind of realities of the negotiations that went through. So for a long time, we didn't think we would get a deal at all. There was a lot of uncertainty about being able to reach any agreement. So in that sense, there is a degree of success in reaching a text, even if it's not one that looks particularly popular. And as the other two have said, at the moment, it doesn't look like that will get through Parliament.
You mentioned a mismatch, Gwen. I'm wondering for you, what is the most glaring mismatch there? What do you find the most problematic with Theresa May's?
I think, going back to what you said, or what has been said, this is the best possible deal that could be imagined. Well, that's not entirely true. If you start a negotiation imagining that what you're doing is mitigating an appalling disaster foisted on the political class by the unwashed, then fine. If you took the result of the referendum as an opportunity to be grasped, then you'd have a different series of results. But given that it was always seen as a disaster to be mitigated, then you're not going to get a decent deal. It's just not feasible. So I don't see it being, I don't see this being the worst of all possible worlds or the best of all possible worlds, but it's certainly not what could have happened if a different approach to the result of the referendum had taken place.
Shaista?
Well, I'm not really sure what other outcome was actually going to be achievable, to be fair. I mean, Brexit really was an internal spat in the Tory party, which kind of started off at Oxford when these people were at university together and they weren't able to organise their different opinions on, how the country should be ruled, because back then they were very sure that they would be ruling the country. And then they ended up in the cabinet and this spat continued. And let's not forget that David Cameron, the former Prime Minister, is the man who got the whole Brexit ball rolling. And then the day after the referendum vote came in, he walked into the sunset, basically washing his hands of the entire process.
To be fair, Cameron did actually three-line whip against having a referendum. You can't say he was in favour of it. He was forced into it by the electoral pressure from outside the Conservative Party. This is not an internal Tory row, though in Westminster it looks so. This was a decision of 17.4 million, way more than the Tories ever get in any election.
Shaista?
This was definitely an internal Tory row. I totally agree that there was pressure from outside as well, but that's because the Tory party over the last 10 years has been veering more and more to the right, and what they were trying to do was appease those people outside of their party and to get votes from the likes of UKIP and others who have some delusional idea of the UK standing in the world. What do you say to the
millions of Labour voters that voted for Brexit?
I believe people have a right to vote however they wish to. However, I also believe that Brexit, the way it was sold to the people, was not in a truthful or accurate manner. Not enough information was given to people. Just to be very clear, I respect anyone who decides to vote either way. If they, I'm not sitting here telling people that they're wrong to vote Brexit, but what I'm saying is this whole notion that you can just leave the EU just as if you're going to walk out your front door and get onto a bus, that is not how Brexit was ever going to be delivered. It's far more complex, and we're finding that out now. And it's the working class people of this country of all colours who are going to suffer the most because of what's happened and what's happening.
Shaista, I hear you there, and I want to read someone online who agrees with you, and then I want to go to Simon, because Simon, I could see you trying to jump in there. So Mahnur here on Twitter says, I think one of the fundamental issues with this deal is that it is almost as if people who voted leave supported a blank deal. 2 years down the line, it still isn't clear what Brexit means for us. Is it going to do more harm than good, and is it worth it in the long run? Simon?
Yeah, the point I was going to make is that, well, we're talking about a Brexit deal here, but this text that we're now trying to get through Parliament is only a small part of Brexit. It's this huge thing that's out there. But really what we're doing at the moment is ending the UK's membership of the EU, which is only a small part of it. So when Gwen's talking about the deal and what it could be, this is not about what that future relationship looks like. We have a political declaration about aspirations, but it's aspirations rather than being locked in. And as your tweet just there highlights, I think one of the real problems in all of this is that we failed in this country really to have a discussion about what's the purpose of the exercise, or why are we leaving or staying in the EU. And I think for me one of the big disappointments is that 2.5 years after this referendum, we have a government that still hasn't settled on why it's doing this, and that provides a lot of the uncertainty about where we're going with this and how we do the next steps.
Well, one of the reasons why Brexit happened was allegedly to take back control, and for a lot of people it was about their concerns about immigration, and people have legitimate concerns about immigration. To be very clear about that, there are legitimate issues, and there should be a legitimate political discussion about how you develop a strong and coherent immigration policy, but that's not what we had. And so sadly, where we are at the moment is a very, very divided country, a very polarized country. People on both sides are no longer listening to each other. Their views are becoming more entrenched. And tragically, in the mix, we've had a massive spike in hate crime. And we've got a lot of people feeling very anxious about their right to live in this country. Even those of us who were born here, we are feeling this tension because we're being othered every day through the rhetoric of Brexit.
So I hear you there, Shaista, and I want to direct all of you to this tweet here, because people that feel similarly are using this hashtag. This is tweeted from David Lammy, the Labour Party MP, and it's an idea that has been circulating online and in the streets, and that is hashtag People's Vote. Now, a number of hashtags have popped up around Brexit over the years, but in recent weeks, that one has gained momentum. And on Monday, a group of British youth went to Parliament to deliver a petition with over 1 million signatures calling for a new referendum. They call their movement hashtag People's Vote. And former Stream guest Amanda was on site at Parliament to deliver the petition. She explains it for us here.
A People's Vote is essentially a referendum on the final Brexit deal. It would allow people to look at the deal Theresa May has negotiated and compare it to our current deal to decide which one we think is better for our future as a nation.
Well, People's Vote has united a number of communities around their call, including young conservatives, LGBT communities, and women. Ethnic Minorities for People's Vote says it's important that ethnic minorities who have been so ignored from the Brexit debate get a vote on the final Brexit deal. And in October, roughly 700,000 people gathered for the People's Vote March. Marchers took to social media to share their photos and videos from that day, like this one that's posted on Instagram from Paul Ryan in London. So taking all of that, Gwen, what do you make of these calls for a people's vote?
Well, obviously, from the start, we've had a people's vote. It was the largest exercise in democracy the country's ever had. And I've got no beef about having a third referendum. We've had one 40 years ago. We had one 2 years ago. We can have one in the future once the decision to leave has been enacted and taken part. But to have a vote to forestall the result of a vote seems to me, one, straight out of the EU's playbook. You just have to look at the history of the European Union to see how often people have got the wrong answer. And secondly, it is absolutely riddled with concerns in that, firstly, you're telling the establishment, the broad establishment, telling the 17.4 million that in some way they were stupid, they didn't know what they were voting for, they should have another go because they rebelled against what they were told. And secondly, the result of any next people's vote, and I was talking to a Labour whip today who said that they were not pushing for a people's vote because they did not believe that they would win a people's vote or another referendum. And that is, if we had another one, my belief is it would probably be on a lower turnout. You would have another tight result, say the Remain side won, but on another tight result with a lower turnout, where would we be then? We would be no closer to any healing of divisions, as Shaista was mentioning, the divisions within the country. And it would be an insult to a huge number of people in this country who made a decision and they expect it to be delivered.
There's someone online that might agree with you. Shaista, I want to read this and I'll give it to you. This person might agree with Gawain there. Martin on Twitter says, when I hear the nonsense about another referendum, I despair. Maybe next time the loony left get into parliament, I will demand a revote because I don't like the outcome. Maybe demand that the country keeps revoting until I get what I want. So the idea of a revote. Shaista, go ahead.
Well, it's great that I'm being introduced on the back of the loony left. Well, first of all, the people's vote is about giving people real information so they can make a genuinely informed decision about what's right for this country. So I don't think this is about just rerunning referendums until, whichever side gets the answer they want to hear. The fact of the matter is, people were asked two questions. Do you want to leave? Do you want to remain? That was it. They were not given many more details. And I think the biggest disservice to the people of this country, frankly, has been the politicians in our country, who in the run-up to Brexit, the entire discussion and debate was laced in bigotry. It was laced in heightened xenophobia and racism. There's horrific posters, alleging that swarms of brown-skinned people are going to be running into the country. It was a disgrace. People have every right to vote Brexit if they wish to, but they should have been given the clear information they needed so that we all understood what it meant.
The economy was going to collapse if we voted to leave.
Such
as the Treasury forecasts.
No, I said earlier on.
We were given huge amounts of information, and by the government, by the Remain campaign, which has by and large proven to be wildly overstated, and we're getting it again now. The same people who got it wrong last time are getting it wrong again.
It's interesting you say that, Gawain. I hear you there, and it's interesting you say that we were given huge amounts of information. Online, though, and this might be symptomatic of what happens with the public and information that is given from on high, they don't seem to know that information or do not seem to believe it. This is from Fiaz, who says, we were all told before the referendum, or all we were told before the referendum was either in or out. We weren't told about any deal, and this deal is a bad deal. I voted for leave, but now I would vote remain. Hashtag Brexit. Simon, I'll direct this one to you.
Yeah, I think the issue here is that there are two questions, two challenges. On the one hand, there's those who have always wanted to have a second referendum because they felt that the campaign wasn't fair or that we didn't know what we know now, and so we should have the opportunity to remain. But there's another argument, which has been, I think, one of the reasons why this has been more successful, which is that now that we know what leaving involves, we have a choice in that. You can leave with the deal that Theresa May has negotiated, or you can leave without the deal. And so in the narrowest version of a people's vote, you wouldn't be having an option to remain, but you'd be having an option to accept the negotiated deal, or to risk leaving without a deal and seeing how that pays out. So the challenge here really is about what is it that what's going to be on the ballot paper, and we can't even agree on that. Both Gwen and Shaista are talking about having a leave-remain vote, but there's also an option which is remain, leave with the deal, and leave without the deal. Again, I think this kind of points to the sort of the uncertainty of the debate in all of this, that we got lots of different voices, lots of different interests. And again, in a democracy, we want to have people's voices. We want people to know. One of the things that's interesting is that actually you haven't seen a big churn of votes. The basic polling on leaving or remaining has actually stayed fairly 50-50, as it has throughout the whole period. So it's not that there's a huge shift in opinion. It's just that there is uncertainty. And I think for a lot of people, they recognise this is important. They also recognise they don't really know what's involved, and they want to have a say in the process.
I do want to share the voice of another person who says exactly that. He wants to have a say in this process. This is Dami, who is actually a former so-called Brexiteer. Here's what he told the stream.
My name is Dami, and I'm part of a group called Remain Now, which is a group of people who voted to leave the EU in 2016, who now believe the right thing for the country is to have a people's vote and a chance for the country to have a say on the deal that the government brings back to the country. In 2016, we were given false promises and we didn't have all the information. But now we've been able to have a look at the government's deal and compare it to the option of remaining in the EU. We want a chance to decide for ourselves.
So deciding for ourselves, though not necessarily looking likely. Shaista, moving forward, a week away from this vote and the debate that we will see coming up in Parliament, what will happen if Theresa May is not successful?
Well, no one knows what will happen, and that's part of the reason why there's a heightened state of anxiety and people feel the tension. We don't know what's going to happen. There's a possibility that there could be a general election. I don't think that will happen. There's a possibility that this people's vote that is definitely gaining momentum. I mean, we've already had two of your viewers, Fayaz and Demi there, who voted to leave, who are now saying they've changed their minds. And equally, there might be people who say, well, actually, we've decided more than ever that we want to leave. But the point is there wasn't enough information given. And so now we've reached this very difficult moment. And I think it's a critical stage for the UK. It's very damaging for our democracy. And people feel greatly anxious because they don't know what's happening.
I want to play you a little tape that happened over the weekend. This is the Shadow Secretary of State for exiting the European Union. And he discussed what he believes should happen if May is unable to get the deal through Parliament. Here's what he told British journalist Sophie Ridge.
If the Prime Minister has lost a vote of that sort of significance, then there has to be a question of confidence in the government.
So will you seek to move that?
I think it's inevitable that we will seek to move that. Obviously, it'll depend on what actually happens in 9 days. It'll depend on what the response is. But if she's lost a vote of this significance after 2 years of negotiation, then it is right that there should be a general election.
So, Gwen, you hear what the Shadow Secretary said there, and then take a look at this from the BBC. Can May get the deal through Parliament? 320 votes needed to pass. And you can see here, it might look a little bit confusing, but basically the summary is she does not, as of right now, look like she has the votes to make this happen. So what do you foresee happening?
She's not going to win this vote. No matter, I mean, she's chasing around the country, stirring up apathy, as somebody once said. She's not going to win this vote. However, after that, I agree with Shaista to a certain extent. Nobody knows. There's certainly the possibility that a bad loss will result in a Tory leadership challenge, a vote of no confidence within the Conservative Party. But there again, there's also the possibility of the Labour Party moving to a no confidence motion, which would in itself entail the Tories then backing her. to a large extent, because then they've done their disloyalty bit on the withdrawal agreement, and then they go back to loyalty bit. I can't imagine the DUP supporting the Labour Party, given that the Labour Party has supported Sinn Féin and United Ireland. The whole thing is a kibosh at this point, and I can't pretend, and I would be a damn fool to pretend to know what happens next.
Simon, I could see you nodding your head there. Do you see Theresa May facing pressure to resign if she's not able to get these votes?
Like she has ever since last year's general election, where she seemed to throw away this amazing lead in the polls and scrape a victory. And I think viewers overseas might think, it's incredible that here we are so far down the line. None of us know what's going to happen. The government doesn't know what's going to happen, and the path looks completely cluttered. Whatever option you take, and I think one of the real difficulties here is that, as unpopular as Theresa May's plan is, it is not faced by a consensus around an alternative plan. That she gets attacked for being too hard, too soft, too close, too far. It's not all coming from one place, and as long as she's getting that kind of flack, she might take the view that she's doing the right thing, that everyone's unhappy, so she can sell it to everyone saying we've all had to pay a price for this, and this maybe is the way forward. And we've got to remember we've been through crises like this before in this process, and the way that that has resolved after a lot of anguish has been that the UK is kind of carried along the path that it's going on. So it may be that the ultimate upshot of this is that we end up with this withdrawal agreement, and nobody's really happy with it. And then we'll go and have another round of unhappiness as we try and work out what the future relationship's going to be. So,
very cheery prognosis.
Oh, I'm all smiles on this one.
So I want to bring this up because, picking up on that note, Mahnur here says that we, the younger generation, will be living longer with the impact of Brexit in our country as opposed to the 64% of 65 plus who voted leave. Also, eventually, if and when there are unresolved long-term problems, we will have to deal with something we didn't even get to have a say on. So that's just one view from our community. But Shaista, how optimistic are you about the UK's future?
Well, I'm very optimistic about the young people of this country because I believe that they are horrified, as are many of us, about what's going on, and they deserve better. And more than anything, what we need to do is we need to heal the divisions in this country. And I'm very sad to say that the politicians are the ones who are busy fanning the flames of this xenophobia. And I don't see that getting any better. But the pushback is growing. You see more and more people coming together. This is what the people's vote is about. We've got a big protest happening on Sunday against the rise of the far right in this country, linked to Brexit, linked to all the rhetoric around Brexit, and more everyday people are coming together to push back against this.
So I will share this from a member of our community to give us a little optimism here. This is a gentleman who says, I think there's every possibility that she will succeed, Gwen. And of course, he's referencing Theresa May there. In your ideal world, what will you see happening? What do you wish could happen?
I share Shaista's optimism for the future. I really do. One of the things as a country we are terribly bad at is making plans. What we're terribly good at is muddling through. And whatever is thrown at our country, our society, we seem to be quite good at just getting on with reality. And possibly the chaos of the last 2 years and the next period of time is partially around the fact that we're trying to make hard and fast plans, and we've never been very good at that. What we are particularly good at is actually coming together. And I don't follow the sort of doom and gloom about divide a nation to that extent. I do think that this is a broadly and better than most tolerant, decent, welcoming, friendly nation, and I'm delighted to be part of it. And I'm sure that the youth in the future, who are the people who are the youth today, will have a fine opportunity, if they so desire, to overturn Brexit, but not before it's happened.
So you just heard from Gawain Towler. You also heard from Simon Usherwood and Shaista Aziz as part of this conversation. I will leave us with one comment we got from YouTube. 123 Ryan says, this is a new chapter. Can't decide though if he's being sarcastic or not, whether or not that is real optimism. So we're going to hope for that is optimism. And of course, online. If you're confused about any of the words you heard today, our friends at aljazeera.com have you covered. Article 50, People's Vote, No Deal, Single Market is a brief guide to Brexit jargon. Online, aljazeera.com. A big thank you to our guests and, of course, to our community. Until next time, we'll see you online.
I'm Simon Ushwood. I'm Deputy Director of the UK and a Changing Europe, and you're in the stream.
I'm Gawain Tola. I'm a Brexit campaigner and commentator, and you're in the stream.
Hi, I'm Shai